There are very few horror movies that can shock me and leave me slightly traumatized after watching, and The Mist is one of those movies. And it's freaking awesome. Released in 2007, we follow David, played by Thomas Jane, who is stuck in a supermarket with his son Billy, while a mysterious mist covers their small town, which brings with it terrifying, hideous monsters, where survivors hide in this supermarket and must try to survive. But at what cost? And more importantly, what are these creatures? Why are they here? Could they be monsters from another realm, or some kind of divine punishment? Well, this is one of the great mysteries of The Mist. So today we are going to explore 10 things that you didn't know about The Mist. So hopefully we can turn those little grey arrows pointing down in my analytics into green arrows pointing up, to prove that my channel isn't past its prime. Spoilers, it totally is. But let's have a good time while we're at it and check it out anyway. Number 10. An idea of a prehistoric bird let loose in a grocery store. It was 1976 when Stephen King visited his local grocery store after a horrific storm. Upon visiting the store, looking for hot dog buns no less, he then imagined what would it be like if one of the after effects of this chaotic storm would be if a big prehistoric bird was let loose in the store, and flapping its wings, knocking over mundane items like pineapple chunks. This further got him thinking about the notion of people being trapped inside the store, taking cover with the supermarket being surrounded by prehistoric animals and insects. And well, it just so happened that this premise came to King at just the right time, as round about that time he was meant to be contributing a short story to an anthology horror novel called Dark Forces, of which he didn't have any ideas. But after this trip to the store, he created the short story The Mist, which would be published in Dark Forces in 1980, as well as being re-released in the 1985 King anthology novel Skeleton Crew, and from there it would also be released as a novella. And as Wikipedia puts it, The Mist short story won a World Fantasy Award and Locus Award, and is considered one of King's most iconic offerings that he has given us over his long career. By the way, why do we call groceries groceries? They aren't gross. Shouldn't we call them yummeries or delisheries? Just food for thought. Literally. Number 9. The movie was 27 years in the making. It's here we get to filmmaker Frank Darabont. At the time The Mist was published, he was an aspiring filmmaker. After reading The Mist in 1980, he knew that he really wanted to make a screen adaptation of this haunting tale. At that time, Darabont had bought the rights of Stephen King's short story, The Woman in the Room, for a staggering $1, which was actually part of a plan for King to help aspiring filmmakers. Darabont would direct a short movie version of The Woman in the Room in 1983, and from there his efforts as a filmmaker would go from strength to strength, where he would write the scripts for A Nightmare on Elm Street 3 and the Blob remake. However, in the early 90s, Darabont decided that he was going to direct his first feature film, and he considered making The Mist as his first movie, but ultimately decided to make a movie of fellow King short story, Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, which was simply retitled to Shawshank Redemption, which would become a timeless beloved classic. But despite the successes of Shawshank Redemption, Darabont never forgot about the alternative story that he could have directed, The Mist. Number 8. The Mist's production still wasn't quite there. So after bringing the Shawshank Redemption onto the big screen in a great and glorious way, Darabont now had the confidence as a filmmaker to make The Mist. Except he didn't. Instead, he would direct fellow prison period piece Stephen King's story, The Green Mile, which once again would go on to be considered a well-loved, timeless classic. So with now 2 successful King adaptations under his belt, King knew that Darabont was the right guy for directing The Mist. And according to Mental Floss, King put the rights of The Mist aside for when Darabont would decide to make the movie, because he did really believe in him, despite several other filmmakers apparently showing interest in adapting The Mist into a movie. So King was literally saving The Mist for Darabont to direct when he was ready to get to work on it. Number 7. The drastic change made to the ending. Sometime by the early to mid-2000s, Darabont got the rights of The Mist, where he was now finally going to get to work on a theatrical adaptation of this notorious story, which despite being his 3rd King adaptation that he would direct, was still something of a change in the mould, as The Mist isn't a prison drama period piece, and is more of a balls-to-the-wall horror story. Upon writing the script for screen, Darabont drew inspirations from other resources, considering it's a story of how human characters can change during a crisis, with a forceful and often disturbing primal instinct emerging within us. He saw The Mist as being on par with stories like The Lord of the Flies, the Twilight Zone episode The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, and the Alfred Hitchcock movie Lifeboat. One major change Darabont made was to the ending. In the original story, the ending was a bit more optimistic, leaving the viewer with at least a little bit of hope. Whereas the ending of the movie is definitely very tragic and bleak and shocks you so much when you come to the conclusion that David's drastic actions have all been for nothing. Yeah, he essentially loses. But there is also a bitter lesson in that had the group of humans all stuck together and not fought one another, then things would have actually turned out differently. It's an ending that really does stay with you long after watching. And yeah, apparently King was really fine with this change and actually really liked it. Well, I guess The Mist didn't feature an elevator full of blood or 2 creepy twins, so we're all cool. Number 6. Change of studio, change of location. Now, I know you're going to find this really hard to believe, but just leave your mind open and bear with me for a second. The Mist is set in Maine. Yeah, I know, right? Wow! A Stephen King story set in Maine? Oh, who could have seen that coming?
You need to leave.
Okay, so jokes aside, despite being set in Maine, The Mist was in fact filmed in Louisiana, namely Shreveport. And going back to Mental Floss, apparently the first time watching, King didn't notice that the movie wasn't actually filmed in Maine, but apparently did ask Darabont at one stage, "This movie was filmed in Maine, yeah?" There was supposedly a struggle to find a studio to get involved in The Mist, supposedly because it is so dark and bleak. At one stage, Paramount Pictures were going to back the movie, and were going to give it a $30 million budget. But supposedly the studio wanted to change the infamous ending, so Darabont took the production to Dimension Films instead, home of those creepy filmmaking brothers, where The Mist was given a budget of $18 million, which for its time was actually a very low budget, especially for a special effects movie, as well as the production also being given a very short period of time to make it. But you know what? This actually didn't bother Darabont. In fact, quite the opposite, as he felt that a lot of great horror movies that he loved were also cheap movies with very rushed, hectic shoots, and that this almost guerrilla style of filmmaking did lead to some great horror movies. And he's right. If you need an example, just look at the original Halloween. Number 5. The design of The Mist. The Mist's rough around the edges production and cheap shoot definitely would have helped with the gritty documentary style Darabont was going for with this film. A rough and realistic looking picture, which itself was a callback to his own previous directing experiences from directing episodes of The Shield, of which a great deal of the film crew of that show were used for The Mist. When it came to designing the monsters in The Mist, artist Bernie Wrightson was brought in to help design these creatures. And interesting enough, he is best known as being the co-creator of the DC superhero Swamp Thing. And he has also done design work on The Faculty, Galaxy Quest, and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. Now, I've always thought some of the monsters in The Mist look like they took inspiration from some of the grotesque body horror mutation creatures that we see in John Carpenter's Thing. And if you want further proof of a connection, at the start of the movie, one of the first things we see is a movie poster for the as mentioned Thing. Number 4. Alternative beginning. According to Horror News, in the original script, Frank Darabont had written an entirely different opening to the movie. The Mist was to start with a military scientist accidentally opening a portal between our world and another dimension, which then gets struck by lightning and causes the monsters of that domain to enter this realm. In other words, the monsters we see in The Mist are in fact interdimensional beings whom have travelled from a parallel dimension. However, one night when Darabont was having dinner with actor Andre Braugher, who stars in the movie, Braugher questioned Darabont if this explanation really was necessary. And so upon pondering this question for a week, Darabont decided to scrap this explanation, realising that it would be more effective to leave the origin of these creatures as an ambiguous mystery, with the audience's imaginations filling in the blanks. I always felt that the monsters in The Mist were always here. Monsters from long ago laying dormant, hidden somewhere, and that something awoke them. Maybe the mist itself. Or maybe I'm just completely wrong and a bit of an idiot. Number 3. Other scrapped ideas. Darabont originally wanted to cast author Stephen King as a supporting role in the movie, of which King often does show up in movie and TV adaptations of his works. But King declined. King still did love the movie regardless, and found it to be frightening, something Darabont would describe as the happiest moment of his career, once again according to Horror News. However, the biggest scrapped idea concerning The Mist is presenting the movie in black and white. Yep, you heard correctly. Despite being filmed in colour, Frank Darabont originally really wanted to present the movie in black and white, with that being his true vision of The Mist, going for more of a stylistic approach to the movie's presentation. Now, the idea of presenting The Mist as a black and white feature was scrapped, and it was probably due to commercial reasons. However, a few years later, Darabont did release a director's cut of The Mist on DVD and Blu-ray with a version that was indeed presented in black and white. And it actually got rave reviews, with many claiming the black and white presentation feels creepier and more atmospheric, with further claims that it just feels like The Mist comes alive in black and white, as if that's the way it's always meant to be. Well, I guess in a way it was. I've even heard some say they prefer the black and white version, and after watching it, it feels like this version opens up a whole different experience when it comes to The Mist. So what do you think? Do you prefer the colour version or the black and white version? Either way, it really does seem like The Mist is a movie that actually really benefits from being in black and white. Number 2, The Mist is Among Us. The Mist was released in November 2007, and financially speaking, it did okay. It made just over $57 million on an $18 million budget. Once again, okay, but not leaving a dent on the Green Mile's box office intake of $286 million. I guess people who weren't aware of King's short story were like, The Mist? Huh, what's The Mist? What is this movie about? Oh, meh. Let's go and watch that Fred Claus movie instead. Yeah, that's bound to be the real classic here. And no, that's not a joke either. More people did go and see Fred Claus, which came out round about the same time, with that movie making a lot more money than The Mist. Oh, box office is weird. The Mist got positive to mixed reviews from critics. There were some who loved how dark and creepy and horrific the movie could be, featuring some wonderful, gory delights, with it also being felt that the movie was really well made. But there were others who felt that it was a downgrade after the more heartfelt human dramas of The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile, with Variety magazine feeling that The Mist was just a gross-out B-horror movie with an inconsistent tone. However, The Mist is definitely a movie that has caught on and found its audience in time. From my own experience, it was when the movie was released on home media is when everyone started talking about it and fully appreciating it. It's accumulated a huge admiration of fans who see it as being far more than just a gory B-movie, but rather an intriguing story about human nature and the effects of our behaviour when put in life or death situations, and the tribalism conflict that divides, but told through the lens of exciting set pieces and impressive special effects, as well as some genuine scares. So The Mist was a movie that had something to say. It just took a while for us to listen. However, this wasn't the end of The Mist. Number 1. The FollowUp series. In 2013, it was announced that there would be a follow-up TV series based on The Mist, with creepy movie-making brothers, the Weinsteins, spearheading the show with their Dimension Films company, which also distributed the movie. After being in development hell for a few years, the show finally premiered on Spike in June 2017, and the series would consist of 10 episodes, and wouldn't have any involvement from Frank Darabont. The first episode took off with great success with strong ratings, but as the series went on, the ratings would decline. So much so, any plans for making any further seasons were scrapped, with the show being swiftly cancelled. The series got pretty mixed reviews from critics. Once again, the atmosphere and effects were praised, but it was felt the characters were underdeveloped and that the show deviated from its original source material. And a scathing review from the New York Observer described the show as, quote, relentlessly bleak, mean, and downright sadistic at nearly every turn. I think the show has pretty much been forgotten in the following years, and who knows, maybe it will become an odd curiosity to fans of the movie, but it definitely hasn't tarnished the reputation of the movie. If anything, the movie has continued to soar. So if you want to see a compelling horror movie that hurts and gives you a memorable gut punch, as well as an uncomfortable reflection on how you and everyone else may react to such a fantastical disaster, then the Mist movie has you covered. I can honestly remember seeing The Mist for the first time, and I honestly felt really traumatized afterwards. Like I just went on this terrifying and traumatic experience. But I like that. Not many movies can actually get under my skin like that. So I say, definitely check it out. But be warned, just be prepared to go on a bit of a frightening, emotional roller coaster. So that about wraps everything up. See ya!